Okay, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you all. I would hope that we would try to finish this well before 7, but we are discussing very serious issues tonight with regards to the council, both the community and corporate plan and the outturn forecast for Q4. And I don't wish to curtail discussions around that before we come to conclusions around recommendations for these. So I'll start the meeting by asking for any apologies for absence. Have you received any?
No apologies.
Great. And do we have any declarations of interest? Great. Let's move on to the community and corporate plan, which I took advice on this, people, which is I can share and apparently present at the same time. I'm happy to hand the chair to Paul Griffiths, should it be necessary. Is that correct, Nick?
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, I'll carry on chairing. Within this presentation of the community plan, I intend to answer all of the questions that were submitted around the community and corporate plan by Councillors John and Councillor Taylor, because actually they fit into the flow of how this was developed, how it's going to be presented, and also the meat of it. And I would only have to repeat my replies if I took the questions separately, if that's okay with both of you.
Well, we'll listen to the answers if that's okay. We may still.
That's more than okay.
Thank you.
So this is.
Oh, sorry. Just to say sorry, Marianne. I was just going to say, and if we still have something to add or ask that we don't feel is clear, you're content to take our questions in that spirit? So we're happy. I'm happy with that, as long as if we feel that we could.
Councillor Taylor, as long as they are within the questions that you submitted, and that's well within the bounds of possibilities, I'm sure. So this is the first corporate and plan, which we renamed community and corporate plan, that this current administration has presented to council, or will do next week. So much has changed since May in the economic climate, the social climate, and the government of our country, that the moving parts that we have to face are very much embedded in the way that we are working and the way that we are developing this plan. Our intention right from the beginning was to involve people all across council, because we intend to be, as we laid out in our first council meeting, we intend to be inclusive council, to involve them in helping us shape the plan, underpinned by the 6 pledges that we made to the people of Monmouthshire at the May elections. So those pledges were the ones which underpinned the development of this, and we invited councillors from all groups to join us in that. The specific process will be well known to Councillor Taylor and Councillor John, in that we had a previous discussion about how the working groups would be developed around these 6 pledges, which I'll come on to the detail in a moment. And then an email was sent out asking for up to 3 councillors to join each of the working groups, which indeed is what happened. We also sought support and advice and help from outside, from a whole range of people, including experts in their field, for example, housing, the environment, rivers, tackling inequality, violence against women and girls, organisations, and in some cases, we invited people who've got lived experience, for example, within caring, but also within education, where we talked to head teachers, and we also, well, Councillor Grocott went into schools went into Magor and Caldecott schools to talk to the pupils there about our pledge for excellent education for all. We had, when I started counting it up, it was quite incredible, really. We had 40 plus experts representing, in some cases, organisations, in some cases, coming in themselves because of the advice that they could give to Monmouthshire. We had 30 plus councillors in one way or another involved. And overall, when you put them together with the schools, etc., we had nearing 150 people involved in the whole process between July and September in helping us think through and develop our goals. I'm very pleased with that. It is the first stage on a journey and a target we set ourselves to engage people. And we will continue to do so as we go forward. And the overall strategic plan will be presented to Council in March 2023, along with the budget. Because as I would remind all councillors, this is the interim corporate, community and corporate plan, which sets our strategic direction. In doing so, we are mindful of two things. One is the strategic direction of the council needs to be based on the manifesto by which the administration came to power, but it also needs to be in place to underpin the budgetary process, because what we want to do should also always precede how we determine the resources. But then they need to continue in lockstep together, which is what they will do. And the engagement process that we have set in place from July onwards will continue into January until we bring the budget and the full strategic plan with the targets and measures to council for discussion. At this level, it is deliberately light because it sets our strategic direction. It sets quite measurable actions that we can take. The second reason why it's important we do it in this way, because we have an economy in freefall. We have a government that in the UK who at the moment is unable to make settlements with Wales. We're not sure what the consequentialities of what we know now are going to be quite extensive public cuts will be. So we have to be able to act with fiscal responsibility, ensure that we take account of these wider, difficult political climate, but also the global uncertainties we face, the increasing cost of living crisis, the impacts not just on our residents, but also on our staff, and find a way of doing things differently while maintaining our reputation for innovation. And the challenges we face are beyond an order that has ever been faced by this council. So it's not just innovation, it's finding different ways to practice so that we can meet, which will be the core principles running through this whole plan. And that is tackling the inequalities and poverty in Monmouthshire and tackling and addressing the climate and nature crisis. I paused there because what that means is that we will seek in every which way, in the way we set our budgets and in the fulfilling of our strategic plan, to protect both the most vulnerable in Monmouthshire and to protect our environment, our beautiful Monmouthshire, the rivers, the land, and work in ways that we can do that, always collaborating with our residents and other people who share those twin principles and objectives. So that was the framing of the discussions that we had in the working groups that brought together the 6 goals. And these goals are the Wellbeing are aligned with the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act wellbeing goals, as they need to be, and as the council has always tried to do so. Just to remind you all, they are a fairer place to live, where the effects of inequality and poverty have been reduced. And as I've said, that's to increase participation of residents, to protect the most vulnerable, and include and create better access to services which can support their well-being. We also want to create a greener place to live and work. So we want to reduce our carbon emissions in line with the fact that the council itself called it a climate emergency. So we are ambitious in wanting a zero carbon county. We also want to work on what was a clear priority across the county, but also within the working group, of protecting our rivers, not just the Wye and the Usk, but all the other rivers that we have, such as the Monnow, and to work in ways that we can help communities themselves look at ways to reduce their carbon footprints. We want a learning place where everybody has an opportunity to learn, so closing the attainment gap between the most disadvantaged and those who are doing well from better income groups, but also continuing our ambitious plans of school modernisation started by the previous council, with both in Abergavenny, as the school continues upon to be built and put in place, but also looking at what we do in Chepstow. We also want an inclusive education based on the new curriculum, which is being carried out throughout Wales. And we want to ensure that learning continues throughout life by the way that we do adult education. We want a foundational economy put in place, a thriving and ambitious place full of hope and enterprise. And again, it's working with our local businesses, our local farmers. It's finding ways in which we can bring investment into our towns and the villages in the hinterlands around them to increase the buying local, but also using the leverage we have from procurement to support horticulture, to support our farmers, to support our local businesses. And we will do that in partnership with town councils, with business resilient forums, with the Welsh Government, with the Cardiff Capital Region, and with other actors as they emerge in our desire to reach out and find partnerships that can work for Monmouthshire. We want a connected place where people feel part of the community and are valued and connected to others. And that's recognising the huge challenge that all councils face around social care. It'll be well known to all councillors here that each week there's 2,000 hours of social care that we cannot meet because we don't have the staff. The system is not fit for purpose. We, along with our partners across Wales, as other local authorities, the Welsh Government, care providers, will need to think of a different way of doing this. A way in which enables people who need care, children and adults, to live independent lives with dignity, but also finds a way in which we can enable a workforce that feels cared for, properly reimbursed, and part of our delivery programme in Monmouthshire. We want a safer place to live where people have a home and where they can feel secure in. And there are three parts of this. Homelessness is a major challenge, as we all know. Affordable housing is also a major challenge. But making sure that the houses that people now live in are as energy efficient as possible is also a major challenge. We need to address all three, so if people feel safe and they feel secure, and they feel they can be part of the community. Lastly, we want to do this so that we always offer value for money, that we continue to act responsibly, fiscally, innovatively, and that we do so together, recognizing over time we will have to take very serious decisions about how we sequence our priorities, how we protect the most vulnerable, how we protect the environment, and how in the end we can work in partnership to deliver a place where people are proud to live and where people are proud to live, to work. I will end there and invite questions. One question I didn't answer, Francis Taylor, because I want to bring in Councillor Garrick. And that's you asked, please clarify why Monmouthshire County Council has the lowest level of central government funding. This is more of a resource issue. Do you want to answer that, Rachel?
Sorry, Councillor Brocklesby. I didn't ask why it had the lowest level of central government funding. I asked why it states that in the document, because we don't get money directly from central government, and I was quite perplexed by it. But may I go to my first question, or would you prefer to answer this question?
As I ask Councillor Gareth, if she could respond to that question, please, and then please come in after that.
Apologies there. Sorry, I was fumbling with the remote, with the control there. I wasn't expecting the question in terms of why it's in there. I'm incredibly sorry. I'm not the author of the document.
No worries, Rachel.
I'm really, really sorry.
I can actually answer that question. It's just I think you'd prefer to.
No, I'm absolutely fine with you doing that.
It is in that. It's in the document because, as you know, Councillor Taylor, our settlement comes via the Barnett formula from the UK government, and it's well known to all of us, as you know, because we've written a letter at your behest and agreed by council to ask about that review. We felt necessary to put it in. You've got your finger up.
I'm not sure what's the best way to do that when one is online, Councillor Brocklesby. Sorry. So would you like me to focus on this and then go back to number one? Is that what you would like to do? What my clarification, sorry, Councillor Brocklesby, is that as we discussed at length in council, the funding settlement that comes to Monmouthshire County Council, as that which goes to all local authorities in Wales, is as a consequence of the formula which is within the Welsh Government and the way they set out those allowances, sorry, I'm not sure what the proper word for it is, those settlements, sorry, to each local authority area. Of course, I'm aware that the money comes originally from the Welsh Government, but I wasn't certain why there was a reference to the money coming directly from central government in this document, and I felt that it could be misleading for our communities who may not be au fait with, you know, the way in which local government settlements work and the way in which the money flows from Westminster to Cardiff Bay. That was my point, Councillor.
Your point is taken. I don't have any problems with your response, Councillor Taylor, and I'm sure when this comes to the full plan in March, we can clarify as you've suggested.
It will be discussed in council, won't it, Councillor Brocklesby?
It will, but I'm noting that
Okay.
you've made a suggestion and I'm already responding.
Okay, thank you. And just in respect of the first question I asked, Councillor Brocklesby, if I may, so you've quite rightly highlighted that an offer was issued to members across the council to participate in a series of workshops around effectively, you know, kind of almost cabinet member portfolios, stroke the areas you've highlighted your priorities for this administration. And a number of members from both the independent group and the Conservative group did try and attend those, although they were, of course, because of the timescales you were working to, at relatively short notice, so we weren't all able to attend. Indeed, I was due to attend the second of the inequality and poverty workshop, but unfortunately it was cancelled due to the very tragic circumstances of the Queen's death. And I guess my point really was seeking clarification, because whilst I think that's absolutely right, and people did, as far as I'm aware, you know, kind of share thoughts, ideas, what I am less certain of, and what I have no evidence of, is then any iteration of that prior to any you know, any representation of those discussions in this document. So that is where I felt I wasn't certain and was seeking clarification, because if there's something that I've missed, I don't know if Councillor John had any different experience, for example, but my experience was that unfortunately there was no feedback, and then kind of iterative process in which to kind of discuss or prioritise. Obviously, there was some documents sent out to members, for example, attending the inequality workshop, but I haven't seen anything since. That was why, again, I think a bit of clarification might be of assistance there. Thank you, Councillor Brocklesby.
Brocklesby, you're welcome, Councillor Taylor. Normally in this rounds of setting up an interim strategic plan, you would expect some iterations, which did happen in the working groups, as I understand. Almost all councillors who said they were able to come or were nominated by group leaders were able to attend. There was follow-up from some groups via email, which I believe is what happened within the Equalities and Poverties group, where in fact a member of your independent group played a very active part on the EPAD and within email exchanges, and his views have been incorporated into that plan. In the A Sustainable Economy group, one of your members and Councillor Neil, who's at the meeting today, were involved very heavily in the final iteration of this. We've done everything we can to make sure that the tables that are included in the strategic plan represent the discussions that went on with the group. Portfolio members, cabinet members did both consult with individuals within the group, both councillors and the experts and organisations involved, either electronically or on the telephone or in face, as they proceeded to bring to the final plan, which, as you've are aware, is going to council for further scrutiny and discussion next week. Is there anything you'd like to add there?
Yes, please, Leader. Firstly, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the way in which Conservative and independent councillors were invited to take part in those meetings. We were very, very pleased to do that. I'd like to thank you for, you've certainly answered one of my 4 questions, which was when will we see the actual corporate plan? You said March 2023. I wanted to tease a bit more about the document, because this is the corporate plan of the last administration. It's a detailed, comprehensive document, and I was disappointed that this feels quite lightweight. It's 6 pages. It says it's the corporate plan for this financial year that presumably, if passed by council, will replace quite a detailed document with targets, with measures, and this feels very lightweight. It's very generic. There are very few specific commitments in it, and makes it very difficult for councillors to hold you to account. So can you explain, 6 months on since the election, we're a 10th of the way through this 5-year term, why is this so lightweight?
Thank you, Councillor John. 5 months. As I'd like to remind you, it's the interim plan. It's the interim plan, which, as I set out in the beginning, sets the strategic direction. And I would expect it to be that size at this point. To hold us properly to account, it needs to be resourced and budgeted at the same time. Absolutely, I agree with you. It needs a measuring framework with measures and targets. In order to do that, so that we embed our principles and goals within our budget and ensure that they are in lockstep together, what I wanted to do with my cabinet was to set out the strategic direction now, and in March come back with the full plan of that size with the budget together. In that interim, it's not that we're going to go into dark space and not talk to anyone. In that interim, we will continue the process of engagement around the budget and around the strategic direction, which cuts the budget the way we want to. My feeling, in a time of enormous challenge, enormous uncertainty, we're not even sure if the UK government will be in place by the end of the year or next year. We're not even sure what the settlement to Wales will be. The latest indication of this, we may not know till January, that we need to have a clear strategic direction. We need to be working on the budgets. We need to be engaging and consulting across council, but also outside, so we continue to flesh it out. And that was the reason for it. And you're quite right, you must have something to hold us to account. We've got in on a ticket of accountability. I have no intention of not letting you be part of that.
Okay, thank you. Who are the experts and the organisations that fed into this document? You mentioned there were 150 people, including 40 experts, but the only specifics you gave were head teachers and pupils. And obviously it's an ordinary part of Councillor Grocut's day-to-day job that he engages with head teachers and pupils, and I'm sure one he very much enjoys. But who are the other experts and organisations?
I am very happy to share with you the full report on who engaged, both you and Councillor Taylor, after this meeting. So I'll just give you a flavour. We involved Gwent Wildlife, the Wye Valley area of natural beauty. We involved researchers, Nick Miller Research, who's probably well known to you. We also involved head of digital from community corporate from Cardiff City region. We involved carers, we involved Mind, Monmouthshire Housing, Merlin Housing, food consultants, public health people from, I'm trying to read the list here, people from transition towns, regional skill managers, directors of businesses, to be part of the various groups that we had. And I will, as I said, give this to you afterwards.
Fab, thank you. I'll look forward to seeing that. And my last question, I'm mindful that this document is only a couple of pages longer than the manifesto document that you produced in April. What policies from your manifesto have not made it into the corporate plan, and can you tell us why? I won't go through them, but I can certainly highlight two. Fixing all potholes within 5 years, that doesn't seem to be in the document. Also, the dare I say slightly wacky Corbynista policy of confiscating people's private property, bringing empty homes into use by compulsory purchase. That doesn't seem to be in the document. So how's that going to work?
I haven't been called Corbynista ever. But hey, thank you. I spotted potholes as well. You'll know only through, I mean, every councillor will know here that when you're on the doorstep, potholes is a big issue. And you'll know that even better than I do, given your length as leader prior to me, that the highways budget is continually being stretched by the number of holes. It's a lot smaller than it needs to be to develop those. So we accept that potholes is part of the management plan of highways, that they have a system of responding, they have a list, and that will continue as it can be. Under the present economic circumstances, to make that, which we saw as a desire rather than a policy, to make that as an action in itself, when there are bigger issues to deal with at this point, would be unwise. But nevertheless, it is our intention to do as much as we can on the priorities as they're set out, given the criteria that are already running with the Highways Department. That's one. I had a vision when you said that about housing of us arming our officers in black coats and zipping round the county looking for houses that appeared unoccupied and breaking in. I think that's unlikely. What our pledge is there is that in the past, compulsory purchase orders around housing that had been unoccupied for a very long time or were falling down was not unusual for councils to do. When we are looking to face the challenge, the enormous challenge in our county of homelessness and affordable housing, that has to be part of our toolkit. We are not at this point ready to say precisely how we're going to do it, because the point I noticed I thought you'd pick up is around the vehicle, having a council vehicle for building houses, which was brought onto the table in the last council, I believe. That is an option. It's not one we're specifically looking at the moment, because at the moment it looks the best way that we can, as quickly as possible, reach some of the targets that have been laid out in the revised local development plan, as you know, is through RSLs. However, RSLs are also impacted by the appalling spiral and crash of our economy at the moment. And maybe looking future in the 18 months, we'll have to consider different ways of doing it.
Thank you.
Because if I could just add there, because one of the things we have to keep our eyes on is how we progress those goals. What we do to get there may change over 5 years. You're well aware of that. Because of the crisis that your council was under, you quite rightly pivoted and produced a revised mid-term plan in response to the COVID pandemic. And quite rightly and quite responsibly to do that. We must also, given the current climate, be aware of that and be aware some of the mechanisms we use to operationally implement may change over time, but our goals, our purpose, our principles, our strategic direction won't.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'm going to have some water. I forgot.
I'll go and grab a jug of water.
Any questions from anybody else? Councillor Fuchs, you have your hand up, and so do you, Councillor Birch.
I think you've already largely answered my questions, Marianne, because I was about to ask you how flexible you felt we would need to be in the light of the chaos that is coming from shenanigans at Westminster, and what the implications were going to be for that, for delivery. But I just wanted to say how delighted I was with the engagement in the housing and homelessness group from our colleagues in other parties. I have to say, Councillor John, it was in fact your own colleagues who were keenest to use compulsory purchase as a mechanism to bring empty properties back into use. And I am assured by Paul Matthews that it is actually very difficult as a vehicle to use and should only be used when all other methods have been explored and exhausted. I do feel we've made real progress from the what we wish to achieve to the how we intend to deliver it. And certainly in the field of housing and homelessness, we now have a real plan for that step change in delivery that we need. And it was great to have, I think we had the two former chief executives and one current chief executive of housing associations in the room, and it was great to have their expertise.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Fuchs. Councillor Burke, sorry. Birch.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to remind Councillor John that size isn't everything. It can be a small document. It doesn't mean it's less effective. The charity I work for, we have our strategy in one page. It doesn't mean that we're not going to do everything, and better to be really incredibly focused on our key priorities and have a smaller document. I know it's going to get to be more lengthy, as the leader has said, when we have our budget priorities in order. I just wanted to add, as Councillor Birch had done, I was really pleased with the engagement from the people that came to the poverty working group, and it was indeed really frustrating to have to cancel the second one, but circumstances obviously meant we had to. And I did have some really great contributions from Councillor Chandler, and I just wanted to put that on the record and try to take in all his comments and all the various different councillors and third sector groups' comments that they contributed to me electronically. It was really helpful, and I was really grateful for that. Thank you.
Councillor Maybe.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to reiterate, I actually found the process of developing our part of the corporate community corporate plan really interesting and positive process. I felt I had quite a challenging agenda with it being climate change and environment, and I actually had conversation with quite a number of people before the workshops, some of the people that we then invited to participate. So formulated the kind of a rough idea of the breakdown into 3 themes beforehand. So we had food and farming, nature recovery and river health, and decarbonisation as 3 separate themes. And we did two workshops. The first one where we developed our initial priorities and aims, and then that went out as notes to everybody. And then they came back to a second workshop and refined it. So in some ways, I think that helps to answer Councillor Taylor's question around, you know, the iterative process. I mean, it would have been nice to have had time to go on further, but that was the timescale that we were working to. And I was really pleased that, you know, it wasn't just that we had 8 councillors involved across the different parties. We also had 12 officers because it cuts across so many of the different departments and delivery and operations side of things. And I was really, I found that really inspiring, actually, the input from the officers and the interest and their innovative ideas. And I think we really got somewhere in terms of looking at these issues across the board, which is what we were trying to do, which is different. You know, it's not business as usual. Really trying to move forward and learn from where we are now in 2022. So, yeah, you know, there's always more you could do, but I felt it was a really good start and pretty inspiring one. Thank you.
Are there any other questions before I move to the recommendations? Thank you. Before I do move to the recommendations, I would like to put on record and thank everybody who was involved in this process, the enthusiasm and commitment that was given. And we worked as a council. Officers were fully involved in all the working groups. And when I talk about the 150, I was referring to the officers as well, Richard John. And it produced a wealth of ideas which will inform the business and delivery for plans. So there's a sense in which we have coalesced this down to the absolute essence of where we want to go and why. But out of those groups came a whole wealth of information, which officers are already working on in various ways to take forward, which we will continue throughout our time to report on to council. So we're asked to do two things on this particular report, councillors. One is to endorse this plan, which was developed through the process as has been outlined, but also to recognise that in doing so, we are aligning our goals with the goals of the Wellbeing and Future Generations plan. Are we agreed on those recommendations, councillors? Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's move then to item 5, where my voice can take a rest. The item 4 rather, revenue and capital budget monitoring for month 4 forecast. I will hand over to Councillor Gareth to lead us on this.
Diolch yn fawr, Councillor Brocklesby. So this is the month 4 outturn report. And gives our budget position at month 4. The report you've received for consideration prior to this, and it is very, very self-explanatory. At month 4, we have a predicted 8.8 million shortfall for this year in our budget. The situation itself is disappointing and not entirely unexpected due to several factors. You've had the report, and the main highlights, as it is a very long and detailed report once you get through to the appendices and the specific line items for each department, but the highlights are clearly stated in the report, and they include cost pressures from around 2 million from the cost of living pay rise, which is in line with the current Welsh Government pay offer. This has come about because of inflationary pressures on the cost of living, which have significantly outstripped the original budget of 3.5%, which was allocated in 2022 by the previous administration. There's also a circa 3.5 million overspent in children's services at the moment. That's mostly around high cost placements, some of which were not anticipated at the time of the budget being set. These costs continue to be challenging, and additional need is still being identified in this area. We're looking at 1.6 million overspend in adult social care, and these revolve around increased needs post-COVID and increased early discharge rates from Aneurin Bevan Health Board. We're looking at, a 1.3 million overspend in homelessness housing costs, and those have arisen from changes in duties placed upon councils by Welsh Government, which have then been exacerbated by the reduction of funding from Welsh Government. We also have £500,000 in cost pressure from Mon Life, where service uptake has not met the very high targets set by the previous administration, and we've not returned to pre-pandemic levels. The report also does show further pressures on school budgets. The budget for 22-23 made allowance for a pay award for school staffs up to a threshold of 3%, with any award above that level being funded from school balances. We're now looking at anticipating a further pressure of 2% beyond that 3% budget. We're currently looking at 6 schools moving into deficit by year end, which I am very unhappy about, and I'm sure yourselves as cabinet members and colleagues across the council as portfolio holders will have paid attention to 4-year areas. The aforementioned points are the main contributors, but the shortfall itself is dealt with in much more detail in the report, which brings the reader to the 8.8 million shortfall position. Now, there are some council-specific areas which have led to this position. For instance, the budget put through by the previous administration accepted a likely 3.5 million shortfall in the midterm. Unfortunately, those risks have arrived a lot earlier, and they've not been unaided by circumstances and actions at UK government level. high inflation through the cost of living crisis has in turn inflated care costs, construction costs, fuel costs, and the wages costs, which I've previously discussed. As a nation, we're now looking into the face of recession, and that's not been aided by either of this month's Chancellor's financial actions. The reality is that we, as every council, we're facing climbing costs which are unfunded and which Westminster is not prepared to address in England, and which gives Wales no further funding nor ability to address the same issues for its councils. Instead, we're seeing repeated mention of public service cuts. This reached pinnacle yesterday in the Senedd, where Mark Drakeford most passionately pointed out to the leader of Welsh Conservatives that health workers are facing pay cuts and also cuts to the budgets available to health services due to Westminster policy. Public funding is no special case nor mystery here. There's also going to be no additional funding, and councils across Wales are also announcing shortfalls. We are and have been in budget recovery and working as a cabinet with our officer team to reduce the shortfall in a financially responsible manner whilst aiming to deliver services for our communities. These actions have been going on for several weeks, and we're continuing to work with all areas of the council to identify and deliver savings wherever we can in a responsible manner. In summary, colleagues, our times are hard and our budget has been hit. We have an 8.8 million shortfall at month 4 and are continuing to see inflation and demand rise, with no indication that additional funding may become available to councils in Wales. We are working to recover the situation responsibly and will be transparent with residents and our fellows on the council on this and work to deliver to the best of our council's abilities and funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gary. You paint a stark picture, but you also paint a picture of a council acting responsibly and working collectively to address the in-year budget deficits that we face. I will bring in Councillor Neil here, as we agreed, and then take questions from the Cabinet. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Councillor Brocklesby, and thank you, Councillor Garrick, for the outline. I'm really just feeding back to the Cabinet some of the key points that came out of what I thought was a very useful, very good and engaged meeting last week, where questions arose from all members right across the different groups. And in a constructive way, I felt, which is the aim of the select committee, to see how we might be able to assist in the developing better policy and a better situation overall for residents of Monmouthshire. And the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee itself, it scrutinised the month 4 forecast budget position and expressed significant concern at the level of overspend that was forecast at month 4. The committee also acknowledged that the reasons for the deficit position were recognised, and also that other councils will be facing similar challenges. However, the scale of the challenge for Monmouthshire was our particular concern, and it was felt by the committee to be unprecedented and significantly concerning at month 4, as Councillor Garrick has pointed out, an 8.8 million forecast overspend at the end of month 4. Members of the committee also expressed concern about the use of reserves and highlighted that this approach would be an unsustainable approach to fund service delivery in future years, if reserves are exhausted and change is not brought to the control of expenditure. Given the severity of the financial forecast, a discussion took place within the committee around the timeliness of financial information coming forward. And as chair, I expressed the view that I completely recognised that the report was timely in normal times, and there was no criticism at all implied around that to any of the excellent officers who were bringing the matter forward and who provided a lot of very helpful detail at the meeting. However, given the severity of the challenge, and that this was month 4 and we are now in month 7, and we're already well into the second half of month 7, the request was that for the next meeting of the Select Committee on the 21st of November, an update would be brought forward, and if that were not possible to be the full monitoring report, but actually the headline position of how the forecast overspend was looking, then that would be very welcome, in order that we could share that, obviously, and interrogate the information that was presented at that stage. And clearly, you know, what the committee was interested in was how much time is left between now and the end of the year. And we recognised the statement that Councillor Garrick made, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, Councillor Garrick, in terms of that you had requested the strategic leadership team to look to arrest overspend, I think was the expression you used. And the concern relating to that appeared to be very late in the year to be beginning a process of looking to the strategic leadership team to arrest overspend, given that we're now well into the second half of the year.
Could I give some clarity on that?
So that was really all that I wanted to say. And back to yourself, Councillor Brocklesby.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. I think it's important for Cabinet to get feedback in scrutiny like this, particularly on issues of budget and strategic direction, and long may it continue.
Could I give some clarity just on that final comment?
Of course, I was just about to come back to you.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Councillor Garrick.
Just because I stated in the meeting 2 weeks ago that it was being done does not mean that I started it at that point in time. That has been going on for quite some time in terms of the work to arrest the budget issues. I just wanted to make that clear to the meeting. Thank you.
I'll bring in Councillor Griffiths.
Thanks very much. As I look at the data that Councillor Garrick has given us in her report, it seems to me that the overruns and the projected overruns in expenditure can be deduced directly from the increased rates of inflation that we're experiencing. The budget was drawn up in a period of inflation of 2 to 3%. We're approaching a situation of inflation of 9 to 10%. It should not surprise anyone that there will be projected overruns given that rate of inflation. I actually don't want to look back and in any way blame the previous administration for not anticipating that rate of inflation. But there have been occasions in the last week or two when I've been disappointed by the accusation that somehow this administration is not managing those cost pressures, those inflationary pressures, as it might. My question is, Councillor Garrick, do you agree with me that the measures that we're putting in place are intended to ensure that we will manage this inflationary pressure, we will manage the projected cost overrun without reduced service levels during this year, that is our intention? But would you also agree to me that unless the UK government, whoever comprises that government in coming weeks, unless the UK government faces up to the need of public service expenditure in the decisions that it is about to make, unless it faces up to that, then it will not be possible for Welsh Government or indeed Monmouthshire County Council to maintain service levels as it intends to do so in year.
Apologies, I have pressed every button apart from the unmute button there, I believe. I'm so sorry. Can you all see me? Am I on camera? Thank
Yes.
you. Thanks, Councillor Griffiths. I mean, there were indicators when this budget was set that could be taken by the administration at the time. There were inflationary costs occurring. Predictions on the energy market, which were largely driven the cost of living back in January, I believe, this year. Actually, no, I think it was late autumn this year, was looking at extreme inflationary costs going forward to peaking probably sometime around now. So we knew that these issues were threatening. So I wouldn't want to suggest that they were completely, out of the blue. We knew that there were prices rising in food and there were issues with imports. Then again, we are limited by the budget that we do have, and we will obviously and quite clearly work to ensure that we shield our residents from loss of services throughout our budget working. However, we do need to be clear and realistic about what we can do with our shortfall. However, we are continuing to work to ensure that residents receive the best services that they can to the best of our abilities with the finances that we have.
Thank you, Councillor Garrick. Councillor Maybe.
Thank you. Yes, a couple of things. One, just a reflection that certainly within my portfolio, there are indications that some difficult decisions were avoided pre-election around increases in fees for different things. I can understand why in terms of cost of living. And again, similarly to Councillor Griffiths, I don't really want to waste time and energy on blame, but I think there is, that needs to be recognised that has pushed perhaps some of those very difficult decisions forward, and it's more difficult to make larger increases later. So I think we do need to share that responsibility responsibly across the council, and not waste time on blame. We need to work on this together. It's a difficult time for everybody. But I had a very specific question for Councillor Garrick. We've had schools in deficit before, but this is a huge concern, obviously. So how do you see, what are the implications for schools going forward, knowing that we've had to deal with something similar in the past?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have indeed had schools in deficits as a county previously, and it's something that we as a Labour group at the time were very, very concerned with, and it is an absolute disappointment that we're looking at this as well. Going forward, our officers are working with those schools to help them manage their budgets to the best of their abilities. We were hoping to be able to manage a key school that is facing budgetary challenges back to a better position. But again, it's a challenge. We're worried about whether there may be consequential cuts coming through from Westminster to Welsh Government, and it is difficult to say that we can protect those if that happens. But we are working with those schools to keep them as afloat as we, sorry, not afloat, but out of deficit as much as we can. But as we go forward, and we don't have an indication of a real terms increase, we have an indication of a real terms cut in fundings so far. from Welsh Government, it's going to be very, very challenging. And I'm not the only Cabinet Member for Resources up and down Wales that is thinking or will be saying that this is going to be challenging.
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. Councillor Birch.
Thank you. Yes, again, in my portfolio, I think I wouldn't want to criticise the previous administration, but we do have a rather an over-optimism, I think, in terms of the rate at which the Mon Life gyms and leisure centres they would recover from the pandemic, in terms of everybody would return immediately to paying their direct debits, and that the membership would grow rapidly. Similarly, in housing, the reason we have a massive housing and overspend at the moment is because post-pandemic we are not returning to leaving people street homeless, and there's been a historic underinvestment in affordable housing. But the question I wanted to ask was, how do our situation compare to Council across Wales, and with the recent impact, with recent chaos in the markets, what impact is that further having on us since these figures?
So, we are not alone. Anybody who has read the news over the last few weeks and months will see a succession of Welsh councils and English councils announcing deficits, either in-year deficits or future year deficits. Cardiff Council has come out, I believe, today with a very, very high deficit for next year. We are absolutely all in this together as councils, and it is incredibly challenging. I think was there a second part to your question? I'm so sorry, Sarah. I was so focused on answering the first part.
Sorry, Rachel, with the chaos in the markets recently, has that in fact worsened our position?
It absolutely has, yes. It's not made it difficult. It's not made it more easy, sorry. It's worsening our position. And again, it's putting us in a position where actually the grant that we do receive for 23, 24 will be challenged in terms of what that is in real terms as we seek an inflation. I think Councillor Griffiths mentioned inflation. We're sitting at 10.1% today, or we have been sitting at 10.1% for September. These are incredibly high increases after years and years of 0 to 0.5% increases. It's really, really challenging.
Councillor John, you have a number of questions. Thank you.
I do, thank you. I won't repeat points raised by my colleague Councillor Neil earlier on, but I listened very carefully to some of the they seem quite well rehearsed comments from cabinet members that I wouldn't want to blame the previous administration, and then proceeded to blame the previous administration. Councillor Maybe's reference to fees and charges, given the significant element of the £8.8 million in social care, I don't see what difference some small fees and charges would make. But I was disappointed by the comments of the cabinet member in the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee last week, where she implied that the council's reserves are too low, although they are at the highest level they've been in 14 years, and that actually the previous administration should have raised council tax by much more. Well, of course, as Councillor Thomas and Councillor Groker will recall,
May I just raise a point of order? I did not say at any point that the previous administration should have raised the council tax by much more.
That's what you implied, though. You said...
Yes, but I did not say that, Richard.
Excuse me both. We are in a meeting of the Cabinet, not talking about the historic meeting of the Scrutiny Committee. Can we please come back to your questions?
So my question relates to council tax, because the previous Labour opposition, every time we made a council tax proposal, made the case that that proposal was too high. You've indicated clearly that you think the council tax is too low. The council tax should have been increased by more in the past. So what ballpark figure are you looking at for council tax next year? Like, is it in single figures? Can you rule out a double-digit council tax rise?
So I don't believe I had said that. And I think you know as well as I do, Councillor John, that budget informs the council tax rise, and we are at the start of the budget setting process for next year. Our timetable for that will be published coming forwards. You know yourself that our budget modelling assumptions use a increase assumed of 3.95% for each of the forthcoming years in the medium-term financial plan. My comments were that directed to the point that had council tax been raised incrementally at a lower rate, then perhaps we would have seen the compounding benefits of that. However, we've got challenges in the next year, and we will need to consider where we are for council tax, and we are working with the WLGA, with other councils, on what is likely to be happening across Wales. Yeah, we need to be realistic. We're at 10.1% inflation. I'm not suggesting by any means that we would raise council tax to double digits. I think that's quite histrionic of you. But what we will be doing is setting a budget which is clear, sensible, laid out and transparent, and will inform what we need to do in terms of raising funds. And I'm not going to be drawn on what that is until we have actual figures rather than playing fantasy council tax budgets.
Councillor Gareth, thank you. I believe your questions have been answered in one way or another, but if they're not, please.
I had one more question, which was about difficult decisions, and we always, when we were running the council, always prided ourselves that we never wanted to cut frontline services. That we always explored delivering services differently, innovating, exploring alternative revenue sources. So can you tell us, are frontline services safe from cuts? For instance, have you had any discussions about closing any schools, libraries or leisure centres? Because our residents would clearly see that as a mistake.
I think I've been incredibly clear that we are going to be delivering our services to the best of our abilities, and that we are prioritising service delivery. Our budgetary challenges are going to be unprecedented, and they're going to be worse if UK government and the current Chancellor, or whoever succeeds them, fails to recognise the extent of those existing challenges and our unfunded pressures on local government. And if they don't take the decision to support that and go further into public spending cuts against the backdrop of inflation, which I reiterate again is at 10.1% as of September, we are talking about some incredible real-term cuts in terms of funding, and that will in turn work as a barnet consequential to Wales. But we need to work through our budget process, and that will be engaging and consulting with councillors and the public on what we need to do and what we can do. So no, we have not had any private conversations about shutting frontline services. We'll be bringing you forward an update to Cabinet on the 9th of November with our medium-term financial plan modelling, and it will also outline the 2022-2023 budget process and timetable. I was clear in my presentation of this report that the actions of Westminster are key here, and Welsh Government is very absolutely, succinctly expressing that. When the First Minister is articulating budget cuts to health services in the Senedd chamber, I'm not sure any council in Wales at this time can suggest that frontline services are safe from being impacted in some form by the level of budget of shortfalls and savings that we're going to need to make. that is where we are.
I think, Councillor
you.
John, we all genuinely wish we were back in 2017 across the entire nation, where it's so much easier to set budgets and so much easier to deal with innovation. But
I
as I
think I'd prefer 1997, Councillor Brocklesby.
thank you, Councillor Garrett. But let's keep within this century just for this moment. Councillor Neil, it was lovely to have you. I'm surprised you want to come back in. Is this a point of information? I thought you just came to report to Cabinet.
Councillor Brocklesby, yes, I did, and my role in this meeting is simply that in regard to the Performance and Overview Select Committee. So I completely restrict any comments in regard to that. But if you'll allow me, it's just the clarification that was made, I believe, at the meeting for clarification, because I think it's just been stated that councils may run at a deficit, and that councils cannot run at a deficit. They need to have a balanced budget. And separately, for clarity, I believe, as it was noted at the meeting, that Councillor Garrick's response in regard to this was that opportunities were missed in previous years for council tax rises. I believe that's correct, Councillor Garrick.
That is correct.
So,
that is what I said.
Yeah, so thank you for allowing me to make those clarifications, Councillor Brocklesby.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. It was a pleasure to have you here. Let's move to the recommendations. I can state on the record here that we will have a balanced budget. We are going to act responsibly. We're going to act in tandem and with officers who are working tirelessly for this to happen. But we have to accept, as we look forward to next year's budget, that we are in absolute unprecedented times for every council across the UK, in a level of uncertainty and unpredictability which certainly hasn't been seen in my lifetime. And we have to continue, as I said earlier, to be innovative, to work differently, but to always focus on the fact that we will protect the services for the most vulnerable, for those most in need, and we will attempt to protect our environment and nature. And we will do it together, and we will attempt to do it as a council, because I think, as Councillor John and Councillor Taylor will agree, this is a moment of emergency where, just as in the pandemic, council worked together, we will need to find ways to work together now. We have a whole series of recommendations, as you quite rightly expect, given the nature of this report. So I'd just like to take them one by one. I will read out the headlines rather than the whole lot, because I don't need a reading lesson and you don't need to listen. So 2.1 is that we recognise the significant overspend forecast. Is that agreed, Cabinet? Agreed. 2.2, that we request a leadership team to look over the spend and work through appropriate recovery measures. We know that's already ongoing, and we are fully cognizant of that process. So agreed. That we reckon the need for the importance of a balanced outturn being achieved by 22-23. Thank you. We recognise the ongoing financial risks, the revenue budget, because of the pay negotiations. Agreed. We recognise that the overall revenue budget is being subsidised by capital receipts. Agreed. That we note the forecast 100% delivery of the budgeted mandatory savings that are detailed in the report. Agreed. And we also look at Appendix 1, and we note the continuous difficulty in delivering capital projects, given the situation we find ourselves in. Agreed. Thank you, Cabinet. A sobering discussion and one that's going to continue on a daily, if not weekly basis. So let's move on to item 5, and I would like to bring in Councillor Thomas. It's our statutory requirement to report the Regional Partnership Board, the Gwent Market Position Statement. Councillor Thomas?
Okay, diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Arweinydd. Thank you, Leader. Obviously, the purpose of the market share, the market stability report by the Regional Partnership Board, it sets out a high-level overview and assessment of the overall sufficiency of care and support, and obviously of the stability of the market for regulated services within the Gwent area, within the 5 counties. And obviously it complies with the Section 9 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act 2014. I don't intend to read through all of the key issues, but really just the highlights. Obviously, in terms of care homes, they've suffered during the pandemic with people not going into care, obviously because of the problem of COVID infection. And some homes were really teetering on the edge. They've now become more stable. So overall, the care home situation is generally stable. Domiciliary care, really that is at a critical level across the 5 counties that this report covers. And it is really quite a big issue in terms of trying to provide domiciliary care. Particularly for us in Monmouthshire, which is very rural, but obviously in the 4 other local authorities as well. As much as possible has obviously been a regional approach, and that certainly has helped in terms of things like recruitment and retention. Recruitment and retention is a key issue for all local authorities in terms of care staff, and I'm sure we've seen a bleed back to retail and to hospitality since the COVID pandemic has sort of to a certain extent eased. Huge pressures as well on well-being of staff because of COVID, mental health issues, and also for people with mental health issues, there's been a big pressure and an increase in numbers. Children's services, obviously we want to see an improvement of outcomes for children across the board, and to see the need for a single sort of front door approach in terms of children going into care. Undoubtedly, there is an insufficiency of children care places to meet the needs across the region, particularly obviously in terms of residential care and fostering, and that is an ongoing issue which the RPB is obviously working on. The eliminate agenda is obviously to take out for-profit organisations providing childcare. That could affect future investment in places, and I think it already actually is. Very much so, the 5 local authorities are working in partnership. And just to conclude, in Gwent, people have a choice, individuals have a choice of service available to them to meet their needs. However, the stability of the market in adult services is likely to be put to the test during the coming financial year, 2022-23, as we've already heard, increasing cost pressures mount, and obviously the long-term issues of retention and recruitment really does pose quite a big threat to this sector, and things like mental health and learning disabilities. There's obviously a renewed opportunity for the regional team and commissioning organisation to work closely to develop a framework for action and take forward key commissioning related activities. Children's services, there's going to have to be a careful balance to be struck between ensuring that the right level of services for looked after children are commissioned, and very importantly, the issue of close to home provision to reduce relies on some very high profit making organisations, and often these children are then being placed in those places which are far away from their home and their social contact, and obviously no one wants to see that. So obviously this report will feed in to the population survey, and obviously the 5 authorities across what was sort of Greater Gwent will work together to ensure a good level of service, both at adult and for children. So other than that, I'm happy to take questions. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I believe Councillor Taylor has a question which refers to this aggregate report of the whole of Gwent.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Councillor Brocklesby. I mean, you know, I think that the language used by the Cabinet member is probably not severe enough to discuss the current picture in adult social care. You know, it does talk about the whole of Gwent clearly, but the you know, the numbers of care packages returned, the numbers of hours where there is no care. I myself have local people who are actually in care homes because they cannot find care. So I don't think that people do have a choice in services, I would say. And I was just interested to know what urgent action we would be taking. I mean, this is a known picture, a known situation. I wondered if there was urgent action underway that the Cabinet member may be able to tell us about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. It's certainly not a situation that I would want of as it were, my making, but certainly social services are working as much as they can with our in-house provision and provider services to ensure that, you know, we do prioritise those in most need. We're obviously continuing to engage with individual families to work through what is the right pathway for them, given the very constrained choices that are sometimes available. We're certainly open at the moment. We're looking at very innovative ways of expanding care with an emphasis on prevention and financial stability. And, you know, for example, microcare is an area that we are really working hard on, and also place-based approaches to commissioning care so that there is more choice and obviously less cost. Working at, you know, both a local and a regional level to try to drive positive and proactive recruitment. That, you know, that is key in terms of our campaigns to attract people into the social care and health sector. But, you know, a big issue there is obviously the very low wages that are offered to people within care, and that is a very difficult area to overcome, particularly with what we just heard in terms of budgetary pressures, and also working with partners, you know, for example, primary and community health through the neighbourhood care networks to support people to access health and social care when they need it, and to be honest, to try and keep people well and in their home, you know, for a longer period of time, and obviously try and avoid unnecessary admissions and things like that. We've developed community night sitting service that has really helped, but it is certainly a challenging picture for Monmouthshire, but across the Regional Partnership Board. I think one of the greatest challenges that we have, and I've only been in Ports for 6 months, but I can see in the rural areas, we have such huge problems recruiting staff to do, for example, domiciliary care because of the long travel runs from where they actually live. And for living in Monmouthshire, which overall has a high salary level, carers generally are recruited from the A465 and beyond, the heads of the valley area, for them to travel to, say, mid Monmouthshire, and with fuel now running at, you know, not far off £2 a litre, then that is very challenging. So, you know, there isn't a quick fix, but I can certainly assure Cabinet members and assure Councillor Taylor, that we are doing our utmost to recruit and to retain and to give people choices. And the last thing that social services wants is for people to actually go into a care home when they could well be living at home.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Do we have any other questions? I'll therefore go to recommendations. This is as I said, we have to approve this. It's a requirement under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act of 2014. Very sobering report. Are we seeking approval, Cabinet? Agreed? We're also tasking our officers to use this report because we are an evidence-driven council, and as along with the population needs assessment, to support the development of the regional area plan. And I would also add for supporting our ongoing work to deal with these significant pressures around adult social services as well as child social services. So let's move on to the next item, which is from the letter from the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales, who quite rightly wants to be reassured that we have read and understood her assessment of what's happening in Monmouthshire at the moment. Could I bring in Councillor Sandals and welcome her to her first cabinet as job share?
Diolch, Councillor Brocklesby. I hope this report is made slightly easier reading for all of you. For colleagues, the Public Services Ombudsman Wales annual letter is a statutory report. It deals with complaints against Monmouthshire County Council relating to, amongst other things, maladministration and alleged breaches of the Monmouthshire of the Code of Conduct for councillors. The report's been through the Standards Committee already, and after this meeting today, it will be presented to the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee. I can't read, I'm sorry. You will note that it's a fairly straightforward report, and that despite an increase in complaints across Wales, there has been no increase in the number of complaints in Monmouthshire, which are really low in relation to other counties. There were 20 complaints in total. No intervention was needed from the Public Services Ombudsman Wales, except for one. I'm happy to take any questions, but it seems fairly straightforward. Diolch.
Thank you. I think it is fairly straightforward. We've got a question from your job share. Councillor Fuchs.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about other local authorities, but how do we compare with other local authorities in terms of the number of complaints?
We're actually in the bottom 4 of the 22 local authorities. We're right at the bottom, along with Torfaen, Blaenau Gwent and RCT, all of which come to around 0.2 per 1,000 residents. So it's really very low. So does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah, it does.
Diolch. Anybody else?
That's good to know, Councillor Sanders. Anybody else? Shall we go straight to
Sorry, it was not so much a question as just a I think we should congratulate the officers involved in handling complaints and customer service. I think that's, if nothing has to go to the Ombudsman, that is absolutely first class.
Yeah, well done. Yeah.
Councillor Birch, rightly said. So we note the contents of this, and we also applaud our officers that it is written in such a way. And we endorse our expectation that we continue to engage with the Office of the Ombudsman. It's, I think it's very important as part of our commitment to transparency and accountability. We therefore, that's agreed. We therefore come to the last item on the agenda, which is land allocation to Caldicot Comprehensive School, a housing development opportunity. This is both a asset issue as well as a housing issue. So we'll be covered by both Councillor Birch and Councillor Garrett, but Councillor Birch will be leading on this. If you'd like to report to us.
Thank you, Councillor Brocklesby. I hope that at last at this meeting we have some good news with this item. We have an area of land which was formerly part of the site of the Caldecott Comprehensive School, identified for housing. Proposals were invited for affordable housing, and we have we've had a number of proposals for the land, but the proposal which we are minded to accept is one from Monmouthshire Housing, which would deliver 27 units of housing, which are very much needed. So the report gives authority to Councillor Garrick and the Chief Officer for Resources to complete the negotiations.
Councillor Garrett, to complete the picture, could I bring you in here?
Yes, absolutely. So you're aware, as Councillor Birch said, that this pertains to the land adjacent to Caldecott School, which was returned to us after the demolition of the previous school and the erection of the new school building, which is our main senior school. There was originally, I believe, a local referendum that agreed that the land would be returned to the people of Caldecott after the demolition of the school. I think, and I wouldn't like to state I'm quoting anything here, that the term community amenity was intended. The previous cabinet made a decision back in 2020 to investigate the potential for this area as residential development. However, subsequent to that, there hasn't been investigation or investment in reutilising the land for a public amenity. And I've spoken to you already this evening on the current financial position of the council and the prospects of that position not improving under the current UK public financing. It's therefore unlikely we'd be able to develop this and deliver a further public amenity on the site, and as it is, and the site currently is both a locked and undeveloped site subsequent to the demolition of the old school building. So the land's not a public community, and it doesn't contribute to our local towns and economy's agenda. I can, however, concur with our cabinet member, Councillor Birch, on what we've defined to be a housing crisis in our county. The report does speak for itself, but I can, for the meeting and residents who tune in for this, relay some of that information. And that's the local housing market assessment carried out in 2020 highlighted a growing disparity in the affordability of housing in Monmouthshire. And that also highlighted an increased demand for the provision of affordable housing across our county. It estimates a shortfall of about 468 affordable homes per year between 2020 and 2025, with the majority of that, around 68%, needing to be provided as social rented accommodation. Then low cost home ownership at 25% and intermediate rent at that 7%. As of last month, there were 2,220 households in our community with a recognised housing need registered and wait on our housing waiting list. Of those, 802 have a desire to live in Caldecott. The majority require a one-bedroom accommodation at 54% of those people, and then that's closely followed at 28% by need for two-bedroom accommodation. So as of last month, there were also 183 households in temporary accommodation in the county, including 98 households in bed and breakfast accommodation. And many of those are single homeless people with support needs. But there are also a number of families in temporary accommodation. We need affordable and sociable housing in Monmouthshire, and there's an explicit need for homes in the Caldecott area. We were clear in our objectives on affordable housing when the people of Monmouthshire chose to elect us. The paper recommends that we confirm that Monmouthshire Housing Association is the preferred bidder for this site to build 100% affordable housing on the land. That's 100%, not 30%, which has a risk of coming back and reducing over time through the construction period, but 100% from a registered social landlord. Monmouthshire Housing Association have been through the bidding process, and their tender has been selected as the highest scoring tender that has been submitted. Now, you may be aware around the table of a local news story claiming that we're being advised to not go for the highest bidder in this. And the capital receipts here are not defined yet, and they are commercially sensitive because we do not have any form of contract. We're looking to appoint or select the preferred, confirm the preferred bidder. If Cabinet sees fit to delegate these negotiations to our Chief Financial Officer in consultation with myself, that will progress. Here, we're being advised, and let me make this really, really clear, we're being advised to select the preferred bidder whose bid fulfilled the criteria set out by our council to address housing needs through 100% affordable housing. This, along with environmental targets, are our key objectives as a council in providing a fairer place to live. And the invitation to tender was clear on the specification and requirements, and Monmouthshire Housing Association has fulfilled those requirements with its bid. I'm therefore content with the recommendations of the report that we accept its own recommendation of 100% affordable housing, that we do indeed confirm MHA as the preferred bidder for the land, and I would also ask that Cabinet delegates to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Peter Davis, in consultation with myself as the Cabinet Member for Resources, to agree those terms with that preferred bidder.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gareth. I think now you've got a full picture of how, one, we're working across the Cabinet in delivering on our pledges, but also the attempts we're making for 100% affordable housing. So I'd like to bring in Cabinet members if you've got any comments or questions. Councillor Griffiths.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much, Councillor Gareth, for the report. I think there's been some scepticism in the air about the ability of this council to deliver on its ambitions for housing and affordable housing in particular. And I think the significance of this report shows that we mean what we say when we're going to have a housing supply that will grow and will be led by affordable housing. This is what this report shows we are capable of doing. So I'm very eager to support the recommendations in the report. I have one question. We will now enter into a further stage of negotiation with the preferred bidder. Delighted that they have committed to 100% affordable housing. Our own assessment indicates that to be affordable, 68% of that should be social housing for rent. And would Councillor Garrick agree that we should enter into that further discussion with the aim of ensuring that that 68% is in place?
So essentially, the local housing market assessment, which I referred to and which does mention that 60%, will inform that tenure. So the final tenure that we do agree will be agreed between LPA and housing to ensure that it does reflect the local need of the context of that design. We need to promote it as neutral tenor at this point in time, but yes, that would be our desired level. Again, we do need to agree this report to move forward, to be able to go through those negotiations, though.
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. Before we move to the recommendations, both Councillor Taylor and Councillor John have questions. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Councillor Brocklesby. Can I just clarify then? Sorry, so we don't have an available or proposed mix of tenure at present, and we're unable to say broadly what capital receipt we're expecting. That's what I've heard from the cabinet members. I think that's correct. So does that mean then, as a consequence, that the Chief Officer for Resources, in consultation with the cabinet member, is in a position to agree what is an appropriate mix of tenure and also what is acceptable as a capital receipt to council?
Over to you, Councillor Gareth.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. So essentially, yes, we're agreeing the high levels. Those tenures would be informed by the local housing. I'm sorry, it's getting late and I've forgotten the name of the report. I'm so sorry, but that would be
The local
informed, and
housing
that would be our aim.
Housing market assessment.
Thank you so much. And obviously, we would aim for the best outcome for us as a council, as well as financially, as well as providing the actual the affordable housing. But yet, essentially, the delegation of authority takes the notion of this paper and would delegate to to the Chief Finance Officer in consultation with myself, and I would drive it forward based on those. To make those final arrangements, because we do then need to step into the contract space and the contract negotiation space. We can't at this stage say we don't let in the contract, because we have to go through the process of confirming the preferred bidder to be able to enter into those contract negotiations. Does that make sense? I'm really sorry.
Thank you. Yes, it does, Councillor Garrick. It does make sense. I was just surprised at the level of delegated responsibility. Thank you.
I think it's a process of negotiation, Councillor Taylor. We should recognise that within those negotiations, there is a very clear set of criteria by which they should take place. We're not giving an entirely free hand to Mr. Davis or to Councillor Gareth. You have a couple of questions, Councillor John.
I just had one brief question, which was about priority access to the affordable housing. I think it's important that local families should be able to have the opportunity to access affordable housing in our area and have the chance to stay in their communities. You know, that's one of the real problems we've got in our county, that there are many people, particularly those under the age of 40, who can't afford to stay in the communities where they've grown up. So who do you think should have priority access to this affordable housing? Because I noticed in your manifesto, there's a commitment to prioritise affordable housing specifically for key workers. So I was just wondering if you could say a bit more about that, please.
If I can answer that, I think that forms part of the negotiation. Generally, properties that become available are allocated, as you know, through the home search process, the general housing list. Obviously, you've heard earlier about the number of households that we have in temporary accommodation and bed and breakfast, and the most financially advantageous thing for the authority would be to immediately fill these properties with 27 households who are currently in bed and breakfast and affordable housing, and temporary housing. The actual outcome, I think, will be part of the negotiations with Monmouthshire Housing, taking your point that there is also a wide desire to keep people local, to provide housing for households and people who are working locally and need to live locally.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you.
I think Councillor Gareth very clearly laid out the recommendations which we're being asked to approve. Do we approve, Cabinet? Approved. Thank you very much, everybody. I think we've now come to the end of what was a challenging discussion this time. But thank you, and thank you for your forbearance, and thank you for the degree of responsibility and the work behind the scenes with officers. See you next time, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Good night.
Hwyl fawr.
Good night. Hwyl na de. No stop.
Nice right.
Good night.
Very confused, Martin, about seeing